Let's bring in our Gaggle, Democratic strategist and former spokesman for the DCCC, Doug Thornell, The Atlantic's Molly Ball, and Americans for Tax Reform's Mattie Duppler. Thank you all. Happy Friday.
Yeah,
okay,
Friday.
Doug, let's start with you. This has gotten a huge amount of attention. The thing I always wonder is, where does Wendy Davis go from here?
Well, I think she actually made herself a hero to the pro-choice movement. I listened to Governor Perry's comments. You know, this guy constantly reminds us he seemed to have been born with a cowboy boot in his mouth, because he regularly is sticking his foot in his mouth. It happened on the presidential campaign. Republicans are having a really hard time talking about the choice issue, and I think these comments don't really help. I don't think women want to be lectured to by men politicians about what they should and shouldn't do with their bodies.
I want to play something. Wendy Davis was on Morning Joe this morning. Let's play a little bit of what she had to say in response to Governor Perry. We'll come back and talk about it.
I would say to him that I had the privilege of making a choice about the path I chose for my life. And I'm so proud of my daughters, but I could never for a moment put myself in the shoes of another woman confronting a difficult personal choice, and it really isn't for him to make statements like that.
So, Mattie, a lot of back and forth here. I always wonder about this. Are we talking about Wendy Davis and Rick Perry in 6 weeks or 6 months, or is this a brief moment in time?
Well, I think that, you know, as Doug alluded to, Republicans are saying inelegant things about abortion, and they need to work on that. And I think Rick Perry's comments are indicative of that. Now, remember, we have a governor's race in Texas to look forward to. So we'll see if we're talking about this in that context in 2014. But in part of the larger abortion debate, I think that this is, again, a parochial conversation that's happening that probably won't be replicated across the nation.
One thing I want to bring up, and Molly, you've done a great job of reporting sort of how the states contribute to the national dialogue. Ohio just last night passed a pretty restrictive abortion rights law. Wisconsin has something in the state legislature. If not, and I agree with you, Mattie, about Texas alone, but is this a broader conversation we're going to have? You've seen a panoply of abortion restriction laws passed since 2010. Is this a conversation we're having, and is there any way that that conversation helps Republicans?
I think it's a conversation that Democrats want to have. I think what we saw in 2012 was that the culture war was being waged by the Democrats. This is a conversation that it used to be Republicans wanted to have. They were the ones ginning up their base with abortion and gay marriage. It's still a conversation that I think the party bases mainly respond to, and the sort of moderate voters in the middle see as a distraction. And so part of what becomes an effective tool is to accuse the other side of bringing it up when they should be focused on other things.
And Doug, I want to get to this point. Emily's List it's a big group that supports pro-abortion rights Democratic female candidates. They have a fundraising website. You see it there. Stand behind Wendy Davis, raising money, getting signatures, all those sorts of things. Do Democrats run the risk? Clearly, it certainly seems, if you look at polling, this certainly seems like a fight Democrats would like to have. But do Democrats run the risk of politicizing this and sort of stepping over that line?
Well, let's remember, the House a couple weeks ago, voted on a bill to restrict abortion. You had the Judiciary Committee, all men, who kicked that bill out of committee. We're seeing across the country Republicans passing, restrictive choice bills. So the idea that Democrats are pushing this, I think in some ways we're responding, and we're doing a better job of owning the message. But a lot of this is Republicans are pushing forward these anti-choice pieces of legislation. And what are Democrats supposed to do? Just roll over?
Let me jump in. Mattie, it seems as though many people in the Republican Party are saying, focus on the economy, and yet you do have, to Doug's point, and to your point, there are still elements within the Republican Party who believe deeply in abortion, in traditional marriage between a man and woman. How do you fuse those two things going forward? Because a party without a base isn't a party.
Yeah, right.
So what do you do?
Well, I think, talking about health care, you heard Wendy Davis on Morning Joe this morning talking about how this is about making sure we have an environment that's safe for women. That's the thing that's puzzling for me about the Texas bill, is that it was trying to hold abortion clinics to a higher standard, to the same standards as surgical procedures, having doctors overlooking this practice. That, to me, is an issue of health care. It's not so much about abortion as it is about safety. And remember, we had one of our great Democrat presidents saying that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. You know, why aren't we talking about that anymore?
And that's to Molly's point, which is the flipping of the sort of culture. I mean, Bill Clinton said safe, legal, and rare because he didn't want to be beaten over the head with he's just sort of a liberal reactionary. Is there language that Republicans can come up with now, Molly, that is similarly sort of speaking to the center of the country while not abandoning their beliefs?
They need help.
I mean, maybe they need a smart consultant like Mattie to tell them how to talk about this without, like she said, putting a cowboy boot in their mouths. Because I think, you know, you notice that Democrats want to talk about women's health. They want to talk about Planned Parenthood. They don't want to use the word abortion. You hardly ever heard them use the word abortion. And so when you have someone like Rick Perry turning this into a personal attack on a woman's choices, that distracts from what could otherwise be a winning issue.
I would remind Todd Aiken. I was going to say Todd Aiken, Richard Murdoch. We'll be back. We'll be back. Never fear. Trivia time. We asked how. Let's bring back our gaggle. Doug Thornell, Molly Ball, and Mattie Duppler. I want to read a quote. This was in USA Today. This is Nancy Pelosi on Hillary Clinton. I'm encouraging people to think about it, so in case she asks us, we have something to say to her. If Secretary Clinton were to run, and we think if she ran, she would win, I believe she would be the best prepared person to enter the White House in decades. Mattie Duppler, do you agree?
I do, actually. I think that Hillary Clinton would be a great candidate for Democrats, and I'm a little worried that she might run. But, you know, the expansion of government under President Obama has been so large, it's making me nostalgic for the Clintons.
Molly.
Is the question, do I think she's going to run, or
Is she going to run?
I do not know. I don't know if she knows, but this air of inevitability that's being created for her is in some ways making me flash back to 2008 when it didn't work out so well.
Doug Thornell.
If she's a candidate that showed up in the second half of that primary campaign, she will be very, very tough to beat.
I think she is going to run because the polling is so hard to ignore. Mattie Duppler, shameless plug.
Revolve Fitness, indoor cycling studio that's revolutionizing the fitness scene, both in D.C. and New York, so check them out, revolvefitness.com.
Molly.
I got to give a shout out to SCOTUS blog this week for basically saving my life and every reporter's life.
I totally agree. Thank you.
Otto Porter, welcome to welcome to the Wizards. Please take us out of this darkness.
I couldn't agree more. My shameless plug, John Bailey, former Daily Rundown producer, leaving for Duke Law School. He's a wonderful guy, except that he's going to Duke. That's it for this edition of the Daily Rundown. Have a